What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of BTC 2.0. I'm your host, Rich. Let's get right into it. This week, I talk with Alex Paknadel. All right, guys, welcome to the show. Alex Paknadel. Alex, how are you?
Pretty well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's evenings drawing in here in the UK, so
That's awesome.
yeah, a little bit sleepy, but other than that, pretty good.
Well, thank you for doing the show. I appreciate it. It took us some coordinating to get it, but now we're in it. We're in the middle of it, and it's going to be great. So, Alex, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the book that dropped last week, Immortal Hulk: Time of Monsters. It was you and Al Ewing did it with Juan Ferreira. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
Honestly, fantastic book. I always loved Immortal Hulk's one of my favorite titles, but those one shots that are coming out are also just like, I think Lemire had one. This is the third one, I want to say, after Declan Shalvey doing it.
I think it's the fourth. There was Tom Taylor did the first one, I think.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, yes. Tom Taylor. Then it was Lemire. Then it was Declan Shalvey, and then this one's me. And like I wrote it and I co-plotted it with Al.
It was fantastic, man. I really enjoyed the story. So was that something you were approached to do, or was it something that was kind of brewing already?
No, I hustled. It was I mean, Al and I go way back. You know, and to the extent where genuinely, like I have this abiding memory, like a few years ago, just sort of, I was having sushi with Al, like in the New York Times building just before NYCC, and he was kind of telling me, like on the DL, that he had Hulk, and he was kind of telling me like his first kind of 10 issues, and it wasn't kind of fully formed yet, but I was just kind of sitting there going like, oh wow, like, so you're using like a rage monster to sort of kind of effectively kind of critique contemporary society, and he was kind of going, yeah, pretty much, I'm kind of holding a mirror up, and you know, because you know, it was a time of kind of burgeoning rage, you know, and we're still kind of in it, and I just thought it was like the best thing I'd ever heard, you know, just kind of, he said, oh yeah, I'm gonna turn it into a horror book again, and so like so last year he very kindly put me in touch with Mark, you know, I think it was when like Friendo had just come out, which he quite liked. So he got in touch with Marvel Editorial and just said, look, you know, I know this guy, I think, you know, he might be good for some stuff. So they gave me a couple of one shots to tie into the Empire event. So I did the Celestial Messiah one shot and the Swordsman one shot. And, you know, they quite liked them. And then anyway, you know, we talk routinely, you know, I mean, ever since, you know, through lockdown, really, you know, like he lives on one side of the country, I live on the other, but we'll do like Zoom meetups and watch schlocky horror movies and stuff. But I was just, I'd finished a book by Barbara Ehrenreich called Blood Rights, which was all about the sort of the ritual origins of violence. And I was reading the whole thing, and like it just kind of clicked into my head that like, you know, the themes that Ehrenreich was talking about in the book were very, very present in Al's Hulk run. You know, this idea that, you know, I mean, I think, you know, I just sort of rang him up and I was going like, man, like, you know, the way you've kind of positioned the Hulk rhetorically is that he's kind of a scapegoat, right? Like in the sense that he's both a product of militaristic excess, but he also can't be tolerated. So, you know, on the one hand, you kind of think to yourself, well, you know, the Hulk is quote unquote a bad thing. But then I was going like, but like, can you imagine what happened to like Lockheed Martin's share price, like every time there's a Hulk sighting? Because this thing just like soaks up bullets and doesn't die. It's like a dream. You know, he is like the embodiment of a forever war. He's like the embodiment of an Afghanistan. You know what I mean? Like, the conflict that you can't get away from, but you're secretly kind of pleased about it because it kind of, you know what I mean? It keeps the war industry going.
He's the perpetual war machine.
Exactly. Yeah. The Hulk is a perpetual war machine. Yeah. And I was kind of talking to him in those terms. And then, but this book by Ehrenreich goes right back. So I just said like, oh man, you know, honestly, like, hand to God, I don't know if I like to think I'm not a mercenary person. Like, I don't think I was pitching him, but I can't swear to it. But like, I just said something like, wouldn't it be really cool if you did like a sort of far future, like commandy thing where like you took your Green Dawn mythos and you really kind of brought that theme to the fore, where you had like a sort of really primal Hulk in a sort of tribal setting,
Mhm.
and you could do a thing where like the source of Gamma is really weird, like an asteroid or something, and you just really lean into that sort of, sacrificial scapegoating sort of motif. And he's
Mhm.
kind of sitting there going, "Yeah, that would be cool. Could you get me a pitch for that by next week?" And I went, yeah, all right. And so I did it, and he, it was pretty much as it is now, but he came back to me and he went, yeah, I think this would work better if it was the first ever Hulk. I went, you would trust me to do that? He went, well, yeah, it just makes sense, doesn't it? It should be better, and then I can do more with it maybe down the line. I went, oh, what, like, you'd be happy to just give that to me? And he went, yeah, because
Mhm.
he has no ego, man. Like, it's it's a really, he's a very unique guy, in the
Mhm.
sense, but for someone as kind of like egregiously talented as he is,
Mhm.
um, he just he doesn't have he doesn't kind of peacock in any way. You know what I mean? There's no, don't get me wrong, he gets upset about stuff, but he gets upset about the right stuff.
Right.
It's not damaged ego. It's not,
Mhm.
he just cares about the work, right? And so he got in touch with Will Moss and Sarah Brunstad over at Marvel, and just basically pitched it on our behalf. And
Mhm.
he said, obviously, like, it's, I'll have to kind of oversee it because it has to kind of tie into what I'm doing, but broadly, have at it. And they got back, and yeah, I mean, the whole thing sort of soup to nuts kind of took about 3 months, and they kind of went for it. And then they put Juan Ferreira on the book, and like, I mean, I've been a fan of his since like Rex Mundi days,
Mhm.
way back. The book he did with Arvid Nelson, and yeah, man. I mean, he just, they did, fully painted kind of gouache, and here we are.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous book, and also the whole this whole Immortal Hulk run is up there. I think with one of the greatest comic book runs of all time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a testament to everybody involved. I personally think I'm like within the last years, Al Ewing has really hit like this like insane stride of like everything he does is fantastic. Like
Mm.
Guardians book, We Only Find Them When They're Dead, the Hulk. Where did you grow up a comic book fan?
Yeah, yeah, man. Like, I mean, my dad taught me to read with Marvel Treasury editions.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Yeah,
did you ever think at any point in your life you'd be writing an Incredible Hulk book?
yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. Like, I thought I was going to be writing an Incredible Hulk book in like 1991. Yeah, no, but that's just hubris, right? Like, no, man. Like, I mean, it was, I mean, it's the cliche, really. Like, I mean, my dad raised me with, Kirby, Ditko, Ramita, um, Lee, obviously, um, Neil Adams. That was all stuff that I was kind of like weaned on, right?
Mhm.
And then, because like the bulk of his stuff, because he had those like little Marvel digests that were like the first 6 issues of Spider-Man, the first
Yeah.
6 issues of Hulk and stuff. And Hulk was always like my guy, right? And then, as I got older, he had like, because he would always let me read like the British black and white reprints, because they used to
Okay.
do like Marvel Weekly, which is just like reprints of the sort of 60s stuff. And then when I got older, and like I didn't have like hands perpetually coated in yogurt and chocolate, he let me read like his American collection. So that was when, and it was that whole like, you're ready for X-Men now, my son. So like, then you bring out the kind of Claremont Cochrane, So they'd always kind of been there, but I didn't start buying them with my own money. I mean, it couldn't be more cliche, could it? I didn't start buying them with my own money until X-Men 1. So like my
Okay.
dad took me to Forbidden Planet London
Awesome.
in like September 91, and that was like my first ever trip to the comic book store, and it was like the biggest one in Europe.
Yeah.
So like just wandering into this like carnival of delights, and like that was it, man. Like I had the bug. And I decided like after reading like X-Force, I was like, this is, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write these things. And like I was asking my dad, I was like, who's the youngest ever? And like I think at the time it was Jim Shooter. I think Jim Shooter started on Legion of Heroes when he was 13. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this when I'm 12. And like I think it took me 25 years to get anything done. So like, I didn't quite make it. I wasn't even close to getting under the wire.
That's funny. So, but like, how did you end up like? There's a gap between 12 and however old you were. Like, what brought you back kind of full circle to say, hey, you know what? I may not be 12 years old anymore, but I'm going to write comics now.
Honestly, like, I mean, so like I went away, like I did a PhD in English, thinking that it would, I always wanted to write, but I thought I was going to write like the great kind of European novel. And then I did a PhD, got that, moved back to London with very kind of lofty kind of with with a life partner and more sort of grounded ambitions. Got a job, and like, I mean, let me preface it, like, I'm not saying I'm not like too good for a day job or anything, and the day job was good, but like it was one of those things where I didn't really, it didn't, the pace kind of,
you hit the wall of saying, this isn't for me anymore.
Pretty much, yeah, man. Like, I was really like, the commute was rough. So I was getting up at 5 off having not really slept.
Right.
And then like I'd get back home at like 8 at night, because it was in that kind of, I was working in media in London, which is very kind of, it's not quite sleep under your desk, but there's a definite kind of culture of like, you leave when the job's done, not at 5:30. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I know, like, I'm describing like America.
Like, no, it's still. Believe me, like, I understand. Like, my wife used to coordinate. She used to be like a head editor of like a very big advertising company in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And it was very much like, what's the turn of phrase? Hurry up and wait. So like at 5:30 when she's supposed to leave, it would be like, hey, we need to send these tapes out to so and so, and this has to be re-edited for this and that. So like, you can't really go anywhere, But this, I completely understand. Yeah.
but yeah, like I got super sick, and that's when I kind of picked up the pen again, I guess. And then we moved out of London to where we are now. I live in a town in the north of England. We sort of said, we had a discussion and said, look, I mean, I'm sure, like, in the same way that, like, leaving, Manhattan or Brooklyn, if you leave, you're not really coming back.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, you're in a centrifuge, right? Like, once you drop out of that, it's like getting on a carousel that's sort of rotating at 200 miles an hour. You won't be able to do it again.
Right.
And we kind of came to that decision with London, because like the rent was sky high, and we just kind of like, we were like, man, like, we're not going to like be able to like afford a house until we're like in our mid 40s. We're never going to be able to have a kid. So should we just like manage our expectations and just move? So we did, and we moved up here, and it's, it was a much slower pace. And I started writing again, started shaking some stuff loose. And one of the people, I mean, I knew him before, but, one of the people that I sort of, re-engaged with was Andy Diggle, who, I at the time was writing Daredevil, right? And I'd always, we go down to the pub, and I would tell him my stupid ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and like Andy's like like a tough love kind of guy, and he would
Mm-hmm.
just say like, and write it down, just stop telling me your dumb ideas. If you're prepared to write them down, I'll hear them out, and I'll do what I can, but until
Yeah.
you do that, you're wasting my time. So I did, and like literally within a week, like there's a comic show called Thought Bubble,
Uh-huh.
in the north of England, which is quite a famous one.
Yeah.
It's almost it's the one that everyone kind of likes to go to, because it's
Mm-hmm.
much more. If it's like an end of year kind of, it's like spring break for kind of comic creators, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were there, and Will Dennis was there, who was then still, albeit outgoing, group editor at Vertigo. And Andy, man, like, I mean, that was the moment that kind of changed my life, really. Like he just kind of almost like grabbed me by the collar. And I'd written up a pitch, which I had never done. I've been too lazy, and too not lazy, but like too self-conscious and too kind
Yeah.
of craven, right? And he just sat me down and went, right, I'm going to the bar, you two talk, and left. And that was that, man. Like, I spoke to Will, and he said, okay, like, look, he said, DC's moving to Burbank. I don't have any guarantees that I can get anything across the line, but
Mm-hmm.
sound interesting, so leave this with me, I'll see what I can do. And that was what a book that I ended up pitching called Arcadia,
Okay.
was back in 2015. And what happened was basically, it went through Vertigo approvals at the time, like
Mm-hmm.
under like so it was like Will and Shelley Bond and everything, but it didn't make it. It didn't make it. It didn't make it all the way, and I mean that was rough, man. So like I get a call from Will, and he's like, "Look, I've got some bad news. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
But stick at it." And I mean, honestly, it was that kind of thing of like, I felt, it was like Icarus, man. Like, oh my God, like I'd
Uh-huh.
come so close. I'd come so close to my dream. Anyway, like, I'm sat and like, honestly, man, like went out on the back step, the typical stuff, went out on the back step, smoked the whole pack of cigarettes, and just
Mm-hmm.
kind of, do you want to come in? No, I'm going to sit out here in the rain.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one, really kind of
Just let
petulant.
let me wallow.
Let me wallow. Anyway, like literally the next day, man, like I get a call from Matt Gagnon, Boom's editor-in-chief.
Mm.
And he's like, oh hey, yeah, like Will Dennis said like he couldn't get something across the line at DC. So he just waved it in front of us, and like we really like it. So like, are you ready to start? And I went, yeah, I'm ready. I mean, I wasn't ready.
Yeah,
I
yeah. Well,
so
yeah.
wasn't ready.
But you were
Um,
ready.
but yeah, but like, and that, it all kind of snowballed from there, really. I mean, there have been sort of
Yeah.
digressions and some missteps and everything, but I mean, in choice wise and everything. But yeah, like that was pretty much the thing that kind of set me on that path. And it was, yeah, basically Andy Diggle and Will Dennis. Like I owe it all to them. I mean, it's weird as well, because I hear like other people's stories of like breaking in, and they're always like, they always seem so much more kind of labyrinthine and painful than mine. Like,
Yeah.
because like, I feel like you kind of, there's almost a sort of extrinsic pressure to turn everything into like a rags to riches thing. And
Right, right.
like really, like I couldn't have had a smoother runway, man. Like I'm almost embarrassed.
But that's also like a testament to your talent, like I think that goes, obviously, if you're writing or drawing, that goes the longest way in the process of making comics, where I think
Well,
like,
you'd hope it's hard work, right?
you
Like, I
know
mean, genuinely, like,
Mhm.
I mean, one of the wisest things I was ever told, I think it was Simon Spurrier said this. He said, like, breaking into comics is like breaking out of prison. So what do you mean? He goes, like,
Mhm.
basically every route out of prison gets bricked up after you, so you need to
Mhm.
find a new one. Like, and it's one reason why, like, I'm always very leery of, like, that like everyone's got a how to break into comics not everyone, but like quite a few people have like, here's how you break into comics. This is the way you do it.
Mm-hmm.
No, you know, that's the thing that worked for them. It's always different, man. It's always different. It's always weird. Like it's always weird, you know.
That's what I found out, just like from my friends in the industry and just like the people I've been interviewing. It's like everybody has such a unique story. Whether it's always
reducible to like, well, I found this guy like on my roof, and
and he knows so and so, and that guy knows so and so, you know. And I find that stuff like so like fascinating, especially in the history of comics, where like comics were pretty much cranked out by publishers regardless of like, not regardless of content, but just like, listen, we need to fill this, like think about something, put it out, you know. Whereas now I think it's like, I really do think there's a lot of love that goes into comics, and I feel like a lot of comics is such a huge labor of love, you know. But on the other,
I think I agree with you, and like, sorry to cut across, but like this is something that I talk about with friends a lot. Like, the thing that I think is so beautiful about comics is the inefficiency.
Okay.
A labor of love to me, and it all comes down to craft rather than art, by the way. Like you know, I don't think it's not that I don't think it's an art form, but I think what drives an art form is craft.
Absolutely.
You know, rather than like waiting for a muse. You know what I mean? If you think about like the man hours required to make a comic relative to the time it takes to consume a comic on average, it's beautifully inefficient. You know, like a novel, like a you know, a novel is very inefficient in the sense that, but you're still getting, you know, depending on how quick you are as a reader, like, you know, like a dense novel, man, like, you know, you're giving someone a week's worth of reading. A dense comic, you're giving someone 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's nuts when you think about that, you know. We're like, all this,
but like
work.
I love that because why would you do that unless you loved it?
Exactly.
Because it's so inefficient, you know.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like it's almost like it's backwards, you know, where you know, you would think like on average, like I can knock out a book in like 5 minutes, but I feel like as a fan, like I try to absorb as much as possible, you know.
Well, no,
like,
I mean that's where like I think and like I got this from Grant Morrison years ago. That's where reread value comes in, right? Like, you know, that's why, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I do it habitually, but like I try to invest everything that I do with the ability to go back and, you know, you'll notice things anew. Maybe, you know, I don't want to say Easter eggs because I don't consider theme to be, or you know, a rich thematic vein or subtext to be Easter eggs. I think that's quite a trivial way of putting it, but certainly something that will reward repeated readings, because you can't change that 5-minute time frame, but what you can do is hopefully provoke enough emotion or enough curiosity that someone will, you know, spend another 10 minutes looking at it. You know what I mean? That like that's the ideal. As I said, like I'm sure I fall short all the time, but that's what you want to do ideally.
It's a good goal to shoot for, you know, like, because there's plenty of times where like I'll read something and I'll go, I don't think I'm coming back for this one, or I'll read something and go, ooh, let me put this aside, I'm really gonna make a meal out of this again later on. You know?
Well, the weird thing is, like, it sounds, I mean, this sounds really kind of mercenary and everything, but like, to my mind, that's just because, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, there's an awful lot to be said for, again, you know, as you know, before we went on air, you know, you were kind of talking about, you know, you know people for whom entertainment is a release valve, therefore like the more disposable it is, the better, frankly.
Right.
And like I can appreciate that, but like I view it very much in, weirdly, this is going to sound weird because it's because of intersection of like commerce and craft and you know, the art's the lens in there somewhere, but like I just view it as it's a pure value proposition for me, like in the sense that, like, I remember like when Final Crisis came out, and like, you know, it was really divisive, and kind of half the crowd were kind of saying, oh my God, like, I have to reread this thing to kind of get to grips with it. And it's dense. And like, there's a lot of kind of words per page and all this sort of stuff. And then and then there was the other half of the audience, and myself included, were kind of going, well, this is at the time, like, this is a $3 comic. Like,
Right.
Like, I, good. Like, okay, it's taking me 20 minutes to read. Like,
Yeah.
that's $3. That's worth $3 of my time, man. Like, I don't want to pay $4 for something that, I'm just gonna like inhale while I'm on the crapper. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right. Exactly. I mean, like that comes, I think, with like, curating what you read, which I find fascinating too, because everybody consumes things so differently.
mm,
Now, during this whole time, were you also like avidly collecting, like before breaking into
yeah, of
comics, and
course,
like
man.
even now?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I'm
Mm.
backfilling a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
And it's I would say my kind of habits have changed, like, in this, like, there are a few books that I buy monthly,
Mhm.
Immortal Hulk being one of them,
Right.
genuinely, but like, I've spent like a lot of I think it was Chris Aaron was kind of saying this, like, what has your spending on comics kind of accelerated or decelerated during lockdown? And I was like, accelerated to a frightening degree,
Sure.
because like,
Yeah.
I've got all these but I've been like picking up all these, like, I'm just looking at them over there, like, like weird, like, um Fantagraphics, like
Mhm.
Barry Windsor Smith hardcovers from 1995 that cost me an eye-watering amount of money, and like, like a load of Elaine Lee, like epic stuff from like, I've been doing a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really interested in like, I've been picking up a load of stuff, like, you remember, like Thriller and Tail Gunner Joe,
Oh,
and
cool.
like Strike Force Morituri. Like, I've been picking up a load of stuff like that, just because I got this weird kind of, like, I'm really interested in these things that were like awesome,
Mhm.
but for some reason didn't capture the imagination in the same way that like DKR and Watchmen did.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not saying they're like as good, but you read them and like, they're really good, man. And like, you've got, you know like, or like, Denny O'Neill, O'Neill Cowan question trades and stuff like that. That, like, I read as a kid,
Mhm.
but like, they're kind of moth eaten and threadbare and everything. But kind of going back to that stuff and just trying to sort of plug in, for my own satisfaction, some sort of evolutionary, like, missing links.
Mhm.
I find that kind of stuff really interesting. Like, oh man, like, if Thriller, it's like, it's got Von Eden art, for God's sake, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, right? And then I think, oh man, like, who took over? Was it oh, anyway, but like, I mean, beautiful throughout.
Mm.
And just kind of like, man, like, if this had like captured the zeitgeist, the industry would be completely different.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that
Um,
works too. Like Strike Force Morituri, you mentioned it. Like I remember, like I inherited like a lot of my brothers. My brother's like about 13 years older than me,
yeah.
and when he went to college, I inherited like, or when he moved from a dorm to an apartment, I inherited like all his books, And then
Wow.
I was in there, and I remember reading it, and like as an adult, kind of putting it together and being like, I think DC put it out, right?
Marvel.
Marvel put it out. I
Yeah.
remember reading it and going, this is kind of like an indie book
Yeah.
that has the Marvel logo on it. It's very fast. I think there's like that time in like the late 80s, early 90s where like, not that comics weren't great, but I feel like so many, like a lot of different concepts were going on that I don't think you'd see kind of now, like not, comics as a whole now is very interesting, because I think especially with the advent of movies, but because the 80s were the 80s and you had like DKR and Watchmen are the two major books people talk about, a lot of the other stuff kind of fell by the wayside, you know?
Like, undeservedly, I think.
Right. Like undeservedly.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, man, like, what was I kind of like that, like just weird stuff that like
Mhm.
you only ever find like collected in sort of weird and wonderful kind of anthologies,
Yeah.
like, Brian Talbot's Legends of the Dark Knight, or
Mhm.
like that like Two-Face one shot that like Chris Sprouse did with Andy Helfer, who's like
Mhm.
one of the most underrated writers like ever.
Yeah. All the
but like
Elseworld stuff also,
yeah,
you
just
know.
but just I mean, just a time of, and I think we're in one now. Don't get me
Mhm.
wrong. I'm not kind of getting all misty eyed and nostalgic. I think, you
Yeah.
know, a hammock shape. You know, the late 80s was a time of experimentation. The late 90s, early 2000s were a time of huge experimentation. I think we're
Mhm.
back in one now.
Yeah.
Um, you know, where, and I think but it's interesting. It's almost like a sort of, it seems like a sort of new Hollywood. There's a new Hollywood sort of every generation,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
where
Yeah.
like like you can see it kind of happening at DC, right? Like, I mean, you know,
Mhm.
they've gone through some tumultuous changes, and while they're looking for a new orthodoxy, the lunatics kind of get to take over the asylum a little bit,
Yeah.
and then you just get some interesting shit, and it's great. You know, and like, you know, certainly, you know, when I was kind of, you know, like a teenager, you know, like all
Mhm.
of a sudden I had like, you know, the big sort of experiment was like, well, what if we take these like weird Vertigo guys and give them like X books? What's
Mhm.
going to happen? You know, and it's great, you know. And then eventually that becomes, you know, I'd say, like, you know, with like Ultimates, you know, that Ultimates, like, is where they kind of, the formula that they were looking for becomes set. You know, it's like,
Right.
okay, this is what we're doing. You know, we're
Mhm.
going to do this, and then, you know, you get a period where it kind of settles down a little bit. Um, but like, but what you end up with, I think, is these, like, I've described it kind of elsewhere, but like I think it works. Is like, the Burgess Shale.
What's that?
It's like, it's in the tar sands of Alberta, right? There's
Mhm.
basically this valley in Canada that is full of these like incredible, weird evolutionary dead ends, like trilobites with 15 heads and stuff like that. Like, basically just these like beautiful, like evolutionary, like throws of the dice that didn't kind of take off. But you go
I
back
just looked it
and
up, and
yeah,
it's like a fossil bearing deposit in British Columbia.
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. Sorry, not Alberta.
Cool.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in British Columbia. My bad. I apologize, Canada. But but like but it seems to me that like that's kind of what happens, you know, every sort of 15 years, 15, you know, 10, 15 years in comics, is you get a kind of Burgess Shale period where there are things that don't necessarily lead to big things, but my God, are they interesting? You
Yeah.
know, and it's always such a, like, I feel like I've lived through like three of them now, and it's always a privilege.
Absolutely. Again, like we were talking before the show started, like I think for our age group, it's like that we're bridging the gap between like comics and pop culture and all this stuff, like the geriatric millennials. Um, and I think now it's like I always say this on the show, or whenever people talk to me about comics, it's, you know, like comics now are like an embarrassment of riches,
Mm.
because not only are you getting really good stuff from your two major publishers, like I love Future State, I like all the stuff that Marvel's doing, but Image has been putting out amazing books. All these other independent, like Boom's putting out amazing stuff. Aftershock, like you name it, they got it, you know. And then you have a book like ENIAC. I don't know if you're familiar with,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like that, you know, like you had to like special order it, and then like the first print was going for like $200. But at the same time, it's like the speculative market for books like that, it drives me nuts. But then, you know, I got a hold of a copy. I got a second print for like cover price, and the book is phenomenal. You know, so it's like we're kind of at this stage where it's like people have been in lockdown for so long, and now that they can go to comic stores again, everybody's buying everything, and prices are going like sky high for a bunch of stuff. You know?
It's weird, man. Like, I think like most of the London stores have sold out of that Hulk one shot, which I wasn't
Okay,
expecting to happen.
that's awesome.
Like, I think,
Congrats.
no, thanks. Like,
Yeah.
but it was weird. Like, I emailed like Will and Sarah yesterday. I was like,
Mm,
I think we're a top 10 book, which has never happened to me before, and I'm sure
mm,
will never happen to me again. But it was just banal. But yeah, I think a lot of that is kind of everyone just being demob happy, man. Like, they're coming
mm.
out of lockdown and just, you know, going to the store and buying everything. Everyone's been rinsing eBay. Um,
Oh yeah.
it's just I mean, like, it's it's going to be interesting to, again, like, you know, when the dust settles on all this, it is going to be interesting to see where we come. But like, I thought that like ENIAC thing was, it's interesting because like, I mean, I don't want to kind of put my head on the chopping block here or anything, but like that model, and I know like some people, you know, there's a question of availability, and like in general, I'm all for kind of the democratization of art and everything, but like I suppose like if I squint, you know, like I mean, you know, full disclosure, like, you know, I know and like Warren and Dinesh, and I've worked with them. But that model seems to me, I don't see a functional difference between that and like, you know, I mean, I'm going to just pull it off the top of my head, but like, you know, like a really cool, like a Meat House zine guy, like Rhizo printing 300 copies, you know,
Yeah.
like, and sending like 2 copies to like, you know, Quimby's in Chicago,
Right.
Desert Island, you know, Desert Island in Brooklyn, like secret headquarters in Silver Lake or whatever. And, you know, it's a very kind of esoteric, but like it's an art object, and accordingly, like a low print run, and inevitably, because capitalism, high premium. But I think I think I don't see any real functional distinction between what they're doing and that. It's just the difference is like they're getting a lot of publicity for it. And like it would be nice if, like, don't get me wrong, it would be great if more people could get hold of them. But I think I haven't spoken to them about it, by the way, full disclosure. I haven't discussed it with them, but that's what I think they're doing. I think they're kind of like they're photocopying stuff in their mom's basement, but just with incredibly high production values.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
When you put it like that, it's very endearing, you know, and I'm all for that, which I think is awesome. You know, like that it is almost like that zine era of like, you know, here's 300 copies and that's it. And then like, if it
it's
does
like,
well,
here's a zine on like cartridge quality paper drawn by Louis LaRosa.
Right.
Enjoy. Like, yeah, that it's yeah. I again, I like my hand to God, like I have not discussed it with them at all, but like that's what I think they're doing.
Yeah. But also at like, I think that's also a testament to like just the embarrassment of riches again in the industry, you know, where it's like, if this book wasn't good, I don't think anybody would care, but the book happens to be fantastic. And it's like, I think there's a lot of FOMO with comic book fans. You know, there's a lot of fear of missing out, where it's like, oh, I got to get the new hot book. You know, who's got the new hot book? And then who knows what happens after that? You know, like I consider myself a good fan, where like I read everything I buy. I put a little bag and board and all that stuff and just like organize it. You know, I'm not trying to like buy stuff to resell it. But I do have plenty of older stuff where I'm like, I'm just going to put this on eBay, you know? And I think a lot of people do that, you know, like just going through like their kind of boxes, and like during lockdown, when the comics were on hold for a bit, I definitely was like you were doing, filling in my collection.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time, that, wasn't it? Because I think it led people down some sort of quite interesting like rabbit holes.
Yeah,
like
sure.
yeah, and you know, you kind of get a bead on it as well. Like there was a thing I had going with like James Tynan, where like we were trying to kind of track down, or I was trying to track down like as many copies of the heavy metal Lovecraft special as possible. And like I sent a copy to James, I sent a copy to Jeremy Horn. But like we were just like basically just like every copy on eBay we could get, we were just grabbing it. You know what I mean? And then there was like some other stuff where like I think like everyone was chasing down Al Columbia's like a load of Al Columbia, like really kind of limited stuff. I think Biologic Show. And like, yeah, I mean, I remember it was like I was like almost, I forget, like I think it was Steve Fox. Like I was, like it was a question of, you know, who was going to get to like issue 0 first, me or Steve.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's, you know, it's a treasure hunt, right?
Yeah. Oh no, it was a lot of fun. I was I'm trying to complete the Kirby, the initial Kirby Fantastic Four run, like the 1-100. And like, because
do you have one?
I don't. I have, the lowest number I have is a 9. But like I'm missing like 13 books in that, 13 or 14 books in that run. And because of lockdown, I felt they're not like don't get me wrong, like they're not the highest grade copies. I just want like reader copies. And
Don't
like
need
during
to.
lockdown, I'm just like, this guy, I'm gonna make this guy an offer for like this FF27. And then it became like, oh, let me look up some like really awesome Kirby covers and like buy those comics. And then, so like that was kind of like, it was nice sitting at home with my wife, and then I'll get like the mailman like knock on the door like with like all the stuff I bought, and I'm like, oh, check this out, check that out, blah 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 blah. And then when the stores opened up again very safely around here, it was like, cool, back to comics. A lot of folks said comics were going to die, which I feel like was just like a very asinine statement.
Well, I think again, it's tumult, isn't it? Like, I mean, I was at Comics Pro, like the big retailer summit. Like, I was at that February 2020, and so just before it all went south.
Yeah.
And the plans that were announced there are not the plans that ended up kind of happening. Like COVID was still, it was like a rumor.
Right.
And man, like flew back, and then within like 3 or 4 days, the shutters kind of came down on the world. But I mean, we are in a kind of completely different like distribution system now. I mean, everything's, and like in a weird way, I feel like with comics, it kind of it didn't do anything unexpected. It just kind of did it on a sort of vastly accelerated time frame. Like all the things that everyone was kind of going like, this is going to happen, finally started happening. I mean, again, and that's not a kind of, I'm not laying any, that's not a value laden statement. I'm not saying for good or ill, but like the things that people were saying to me for the last 10 years, oh, this is inevitably gonna happen. Shook out on all sorts of fronts,
Yeah. What are you working on now?
Straight out with it, yeah. Okay. Okay. So I'm
that's my gotcha question.
Yeah. Like okay. So I'm honestly, like, I'm in a bit of a pitching round at the moment. Like I've got some big two stuff
cool
on the horizon. I hope to have more. But yeah, there's some big two stuff on the horizon, which I'm very excited about. But I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, like lockdown for me wasn't the most kind of creatively fecund time. There was, but like just this last kind of couple months, like the flow states kind of come back. I mean, don't get me wrong, I kept my commitments, but like I wasn't kind of knocking on Image's door going like, and here are my wares, but I'm kind of getting closer to that position now. Like I've built up a good war chest of pictures, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, it's I find that whole thing, don't get me wrong, and more power to, but like there was that initial kind of bit of that first sort of 6 months of lockdown, man. And it was like, like I'm learning Japanese, and like I'm making, here's my sourdough starter and everything. And I was just in that weird thing where I was like, are you not like staring into space and crying? Like, isn't, because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I mean, it's been nice, sort of not nice, but as things kind of open up, like I am meeting more and more people who are kind of behind, who will sort of lean across and very furtively just kind of go like, yeah, like basically I kind of went to bed for a month, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, again, people dealt with it how they dealt with it,
for sure.
But I mean, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I dealt with it in the healthiest way.
I don't think anybody did, to be honest with you. Like, it's funny that you mentioned the sourdough thing. My a really close friend of mine, his wife, actually turned her lockdown baking into a thriving business, which is nuts.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, and it turns out like real quick, like her thing was, let me try this. I've never baked anything in my life, and she's got like the Midas touch when it comes to this stuff. So it was like,
so basically, like she's one of those people who just sits by a piano and can just play.
I've never played the piano before, and basically like a concerto first time out,
Unbelievable.
And
That's
now it's
great.
like, and her stuff is like, it's so tasty, it's nuts, like for real, like it's amazing. But I think she did it the right way. Whereas like I could personally attest to like my lockdown. I'm a freelancer, so it's not that I'm used to not getting work, but I'm used to there being bumps in the road. Right.
Yeah.
So I considered that whole thing just another bump in the road. We were fine financially and all that stuff. And jobs were still coming in that I didn't have to see people for. But our days basically consisted of waking up whenever, taking a walk to the liquor store, getting, let's say, like booze for the week or the day or the 2 days, and then just laying on the couch and watching like stuff that we haven't watched, like we just kind of oozed for months, and like it was what it was, and now that the world is back, it's kind of like it's almost like here, at least in New York, like everybody woke up and said, let's party, and it's been like nonstop, like really quick, like openings and like people going out and like all this stuff. And I'm kind of like, wow, like a year ago, we were watching like Brooklyn Nine-Nine for like 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it was our
yeah.
job,
God, that was exactly what, man. Yeah, like
Mm.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Good Place. Yeah, just like,
Oh yeah.
just, I mean, probably like with like a little bit of drool and just
Yeah.
like, this is comforting. This feels like a warm blanket. I'm just gonna live in this for a bit. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think there's that thing of like, because like we're starting to get a bit of that here as well.
Mm.
It's all getting a bit kind of roaring 20s,
Yeah.
but like I feel like the people are kind of like like I've put on like a ton of weight and stuff,
Oh, for sure. Same
and
here.
like it's just that whole thing of like, man, like in July 2020, I was like, you know what, like I'm getting on a bit. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna come out of this lockdown with abs.
Mm.
No. I'm gonna come out of this lockdown with diabetes.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like you're not alone, brothers. Like believe me, you're preaching to the choir. Like there was so many lofty goals of like, oh, I'm gonna be shredded next year. World opens up. I'm gonna be massive. I'm gonna be a powerhouse. And it's like, well, like you ate everything in the neighborhood, and,
Yeah.
and that's you've been drinking way too much. You've been eating way too much. Like all that stuff. But whatever. Now it's like I think it's just like like the intentions are there, but sometimes the follow through just isn't. And I feel like that may have been everybody's lockdown.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'm warily excited about are comic book conventions coming back. I don't know how you feel about those.
Ambivalent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not really a con guy.
Everything around it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's not
as
so
in,
much being there, but the scope.
no, like, I like, I mean, again, I mean, there's such a kind of, it's a movable feast, right? Like, I mean, in terms of what sort of, what determines what I can't, like, I will perfectly, like, a lot of the people there are my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, cons for me don't generally start until we hit the pub.
Okay.
There's that. But also, like, I mean, I would just, the thing I really love doing at cons is like finding stuff that I've never seen before, just haunting Artists Alley, really.
Yeah.
And just like picking up a load of like, just again, stuff that people have printed in their own basement. That's the thing I really love about cons. I'm less kind of into the sort of the whole, like aircraft hangar aspect of it. You know what I mean? Which is not to say that I don't like, I tremendously like, the first one I do, I want to do New York.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to do New York because I like New York.
Yeah, it's great.
Like it's a, like my favorite thing in the world is to just genuinely, man, like I will like, I'll start in Harlem and just like, I will, I'll start in the afternoon and late afternoon and like, maybe like cross the Brooklyn Bridge at about like 2 or 3 in the morning. and just walk till my feet bleed. Like that's my favorite thing to do on the planet. And like none of that like involves comics. It's like
Yeah.
I'll turn up to the Javits for like a few hours and like wave at people and embarrass myself in front of a few editors, and then just go for a lovely long walk and stop for some fur, like in the village or something. And yeah.
That's awesome. That
I,
sounds. I
I
mean, that's great. Like
I had a thing
you're
actually.
enjoying
The
New
last
York.
time, oh no, it's my favorite place on the planet, man. And like it's something that like I never understood before. Like I stayed with Matt Rosenberg, and he was kind of because obviously he's a born New Yorker, man.
Yeah.
And he was kind of telling me like how the city works, and he was like, it's really small. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like it's the most cosmopolitan city on the planet. What are you talking about? And he was like, yeah, but you bump into people all the time.
Yeah.
I was like, that's bullshit. Like, what are you talking about? Goes, no, because it's a thin, Manhattan is a thin island, right? And there are these cluster points like Port Authority, Grand Central. There are these kind of pinch points where that force encounters. And I had this thing, like I swear to God, where like I was walking, I was walking down Broadway, all the way down Broadway, and I swear to God, I passed the same guy twice, walking in the same direction. And I said to him that night, like I was like, Matt, like I had a real like Matrix moment, like a real like Matrix, and he was like, yeah, dude. And like, how far apart was it? I was like, it was a few hours, but like I recognized the dude. He was like, yeah, he got on the subway and like went down and then walked past you again. Like you're not like magic.
Yeah.
You're not a wizard. Like it's just New York's built that way.
Yeah, it's so fascinating too. Like I remember I was
like that never happens in London, man. Never.
Really?
London's it's too much of a sprawl,
Okay. So
it's more like LA.
Okay. I can see that. Like Manhattan is like 10 miles by 2 miles, I think. So it's like, very narrow. I remember one year, this is a few years ago, like I was hanging out with a buddy of mine who's from Utah, and like we became friends after he moved to New York. And we were walking down the street, we were like downtown somewhere, and then I saw like a friend of a friend, basically, and I was like, oh, Lee, what's going on, man? It's like, oh, this is blah, blah, blah. Nice to meet you. Where are you going? I'm headed to work, blah, blah, blah. Nice to see you. Maybe we should catch up soon. And then my friend from Utah turned around. He's like, you actually met somebody on the street? I was like, yeah, dude, like it happens an inordinate amount of times, But I think that's the magic of it. And you know what? Like, I think you have such a great attitude about like, I'll do the convention for a couple of hours and then just enjoy the city, which I feel like a lot of people don't get to enjoy the city because they're stuck doing whatever at the show,
Well, I think, to be honest, it's why like I've never tabled. It's just because, and also like I'm quite bad at the whole social aspect of it.
Okay.
And like I'm not saying that like out of any sort of I'm not being kind of like affectedly like self-effacing or anything. Like genuinely, like I find it really stressful. So, but man, like honestly, like sorry, I'm just waxing lyrical about the city.
Hey, go,
but like
going.
the last time I was there, man, like I remember like I was walking just past where's the warship, like at the top of it, like where's the warship?
It's on the aircraft carrier you're talking about, the Intrepid. That's on 53rd, I think, or it's like there's like the pier over there, and it's about like 10 blocks away from the Javits Center. So around 40 something 50th.
I'd already been walking for like 3 hours, so like I had like a nice burn in my feet and everything, and I just stopped and I just saw this guy. And I just took a load off because my feet were kind of aching and everything, and like he was this guy was he was whittling a Totoro for his husband.
Oh wow!
And like just whittling a Totoro like for his husband, like, and I was just like, this is the best place ever, man. Like this is it was a moment of like, you know what, like we're gonna be okay, like as a species, this is such a beautiful thing, like. We're going to be okay.
That's awesome. I'm glad that story didn't end with, and then he turned the knife on me and said, no. What are you looking at? Because that could happen too.
Like, yeah. Yeah. Like, like I've had some interesting moments in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's okay. Like I grew up in London. I kind of know how to handle them.
I think so. I think if you grow up in like major metropolitan areas, like you're fine with
Yeah.
with like going anywhere pretty much. That like I remember like a few years ago we went on vacation to Barcelona, like my wife and I, and everybody and their mother is like, it's the pickpocket capital of the world, like be safe. And we were
Yeah.
like, no, we grew up in New York, you know, like I'm sure it's
Yeah.
fine. And it was perfectly fine, you know, like the most that happened was one guy tried to bum a cigarette off me and he looked really suspicious and I just like walked away from him. That was it, you know.
Oh man. Yes, like
Mm.
Fellini's Satyricon.
Yeah.
Just
just
like the Wire.
yeah, something like that.
Can I have a
Yeah.
cigarette?
Yeah, like
Clutch the
not you anybody else, not you, buddy. And just because it was just like the
Yeah.
weird, it was like the weird time and place, you know, where it's like it was this weird alleyway and he was right in the middle of it, almost waiting for something, you know. So it was just like we had to like scoot by him, but that's it, you know. Like who knows, maybe he just was waiting there for a cigarette, but you know, that's it. My New York instincts kicked in at that moment.
Yeah. No, I can get behind that.
All right, Alex, a couple of questions and then we'll get you out of
Yeah,
here. Is
sure.
that cool? All right.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like I've talked shit for most of this, so I apologize.
Dude, like this is with a couple of tweaks, like, you know, I'll just throw this up, man. I like this is why I like doing this, is because it's not like I'm not like a comic book journalist where I'm like, and then this, and then what about this, and what about that. I would like people to get to know the people behind the stuff that they're reading, you know. And you know, like again, thank you very much for doing this.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What's your dream sandwich?
Oh, man, like this is rough as well because like I can't have it.
Okay.
Like my dream sandwich is a Reuben. Um, my dream sandwich is a Reuben. And every time I come to the US, it's genuinely the thing that I look forward to most.
Are Reubens outlawed in England?
No, they're just bullshit. Like
Okay.
you just get like it's like a sad, soggy slice of white bread with like some like scraggy, tough pastrami or corned beef, and like it's like it's a pale imitation of a Reuben. Whereas like the last one I had was in Chicago, and I went to this Jewish deli.
Mhm.
I forget, but like a really famous one. I can't remember the name of it off the top, but like proper like 50s kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like and I just got this thing that was like the size of my head, and I took a bite, and again, like hand to God, like I genuinely wept.
Wow. That
It was
good, huh?
no man, it was just like the meat and the cheese, and oh God, it was just like we just don't. I think there's a different sense over here of like for us, like a sandwich is a snack,
Okay.
right? In the US, I feel like a sandwich is a meal,
Oh, for sure.
and
And
like and I like I worship that. You know what I mean? It's just
mhm.
like it was just like it was so delicious, and like I mean, there's that deli as well, like by the Flatiron as well. Like they do amazing Reubens, and like just got like that and some latkes and stuff,
Oh, that sounds
and
good.
like an egg cream. Oh man, yeah, like
Sounds good, man.
I haven't had one in like 18 months, man. It's brutal.
Do you have you can gold if you had the extra cash, you could gold belly a Reuben probably to England where like they'll ship it to
Gold
you.
belly?
Yeah, there's like I don't know if it's international yet, but there's like a service where if certain restaurants offer it, they send you a vacuum sealed kit with whatever like sandwich or meal that you want with instructions on how to properly cook it at home, you know. So like a buddy of mine who, for example, a buddy of mine lives on the Pacific Northwest. He lives in Oregon, right?
Yeah.
He's in love with New York Katz's Deli pastrami.
That was Cats. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like the When Harry Met Sally place,
Yes,
right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like pastrami on rye with Swiss and like sauerkraut. He spent I I'm not sure how much he spent, but he had it shipped to Oregon from New York. And I was like, let me know how that is. And he was like, dude, it's amazing. It tasted exactly like getting it from the actual place, because they give you very meticulous instructions. You know, I don't know if you want to spend $150 on like a New York sandwich, but it's an option.
I mean, like it's the kind of, it's the kind of like decadence
Mhm.
that should repulse and appall you. It's like
Right.
hearing like, like, oh, like, remember like the Edge from U2 had like a first class seat on a plane booked for
Mhm.
like his hat and stuff.
Right,
Or
right,
he had a
right.
flight, or like he had a flight chartered for his Stetson and something. You're like, that's absolutely disgraceful. Rich people are out of control. Da, da,
Uh,
da, da. But then, I mean, hearing that, like I get it. Like, you know what I mean? Although
yeah.
saying that, man, like if you live in Oregon, man, like I mean, depending on how close you are to Portland, like
Mhm.
Portland's a good food city, man.
Yeah. I think it's
You know?
just, I think for a lot of folks, once they taste that New York, whatever we put in the water here, I think it just like folks can't get it out of their head. You
Well, the,
know?
the the pizza thing as well, man. I mean, like I had
Yeah.
no, like I didn't get it until I got it. You know what I mean? And then once
Yeah.
you get it, you get it. And then like you go to Chicago and you're like, oh, this is different.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, dude. It's wild. Like I remember like also this is why I'm fat. This is also like during lockdown too. Like the other thing that we did was, we have Grubhub here. I'm sure you guys have Grubhub in England, right?
we have Just Eat and Deliveroo.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
same
And like
concept, right?
Uber Eats.
Okay. So I remember like when everything was shut down, the first the first thing available for Grubhub was McDonald's. And like we don't eat fast food at all. We haven't eaten fast food in years. And it was just like we were so desperate for something. We were just like, yeah, let's order $75 worth of McDonald's right now. And then like have it delivered to the house. It's gross. But I think food and enjoyment go hand in hand, especially now I think there's such a concentration on it, especially like in like you also nailed it, like sandwiches in the US are not only a full meal, but it's like now a lot of places want it to be like the experience of eating these things,
Yeah. Well, like I felt like there was a point where like it was sort of de facto. I mean, for us anyway, like
Mhm.
it was sort of surrogate tourism. Like we were getting in
Okay.
like all these like we do similar things where like you can get like packets of like curry mix like made to order. We were getting in a
Uh,
bunch of them, and like weird cheeses. I mean, it's all very kind of middle class and decadent and everything. But
mhm.
like, what else? What the hell else are we gonna do?
Yeah.
And like, cool. But it was almost like it was the closest we could get. Like it's basically like we're gonna do a Thai curry and like watch an episode of Anthony Bourdain, and
Mhm.
just like that's our vacation.
Oh,
Like,
it sounds so good right about now.
yeah.
Cool, man. Where can everybody find you?
All right. Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at Alex Paknadel, Alex Paknadel. So I'm on there. I have a limited like Facebook profile, but like don't use Facebook. It's appalling.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, apart from that, yeah, like on the racks, I guess. Um,
Alex, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. What a guy. Really cool dude. I can't wait to see where he goes next. Hulk Time of Monsters came out last week. I highly recommend that you guys pick it up. I'm a big fan of anything Immortal Hulk. But run, unfortunately, is coming to an end pretty soon. It's really, really up there with one of the best runs of any comic of all time. My books of the week this week: Beta Ray Bill number 3, continuing his journey to Muspelheim to get to forge a new hammer and kind of break the curse that is not letting him turn back into a regular Corbomite. He's stuck in his horse form. Strange Adventures number 9 came out this week. Huge reveal. Really, really cool book. Lots of espionage between the planet Ron, who knows, and Adam Strange, kind of leading the charge against the Picts, these this evil force that tried to take over Ron. Huge reveal in this book. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but like this book always makes it to the top of my stack every week when it comes out. And my book of the week is the Blue Flame #1 from Vault Comics. We had Adam Gorin, the artist, on an episode a couple of months ago. Next week, we're going to have the writer, Chris Cantwell, on the show. So stay tuned for that. The book is awesome. This is definitely a superhero book that you should keep your eye on. It definitely takes the concept of a superhero and kind of flips it on its head. It makes it more of an emotional story. The thing that really did it for me is that last sequence in the book, which makes you think not everything you read is true within the pages of the book, which is really cool. Like really solid cliffhanger, and the art is gorgeous. The writing is great. I can't wait to see where it goes, to be honest with you. And guess what, guys? That's about it. Please leisurely caress that like button, leisurely caress that subscribe button. Subscribe, tell your buddies. I'm trying to do 100 creator interviews, and I'm well on the way. Who knew that I was going to get up to about, I think this is the 14th creator interview. It's episode 15, but it's the 14th creator interview. I had one episode where all I did was talk about a stack of comics that I haven't read. So if you guys want to check that out, you can find it on my channel or not. Stay tuned next week for Chris Cantwell. It's going to be a fun one, guys. See you later.